Okay, had to reload it. I think I'm on now. Can you guys see me? Send me a little text if you can see me okay. And I'm going to try to keep it not too bright here. Good morning. Okay, I believe I'm on. There are times when I am really looking forward to a message that I'm going to give. And then when I do it, I feel kind of like it's a little anticlimactic. I'm going to go over there and shut that window because I think there's a glare right here. I'm going to go try it. Stay right there. Stay right there. See how that is? That's a little better. Okay, so I get excited about the message and nothing but the gooseneck. That's right. And I get excited. I'm like, I really hope I can convey my excitement and what I want to accomplish in this time together. So let me start out first by saying it's probably not going to come out as strongly as I feel it because I'm, working on message, looking at it and that kind of thing. But I am so excited about where our community is headed. And it seems weird to say that during this pandemic when we're not even meeting. But I am anticipating next year. I am looking ahead. And this has given me a chance to kind of reflect on fleshing out the vision that I feel and have experienced for the last 4 or 5 years, and who we really are and what this is really about. And I was reading Richard Rohr's message. My sister reminded me to take a look at that yesterday morning, and I was blown away by a couple of the paragraphs in there that really described what it means to have an alternative community. It probably wasn't he didn't intentionally mean for that to come from that, but I took this to heart, that it is really genuine an alternative community, but not an alternative in the sense that you don't have to go there, you can come here. But that it's an alternative way of looking at things. Our own life, our own heart, our own beliefs, everything, just everything, that there must be more. And I think that there are those in institutions and churches and jobs and wherever they are, that they just get caught into the mundane of what it is. And it seems like every meeting has to do with discussing either statement of faith or the pillars or of what we are, the core beliefs of who we are and that kind of thing. And there always seems like there's more. And what I've experienced is that with the addict and the alcoholic, they've discovered there is more. And when they begin to feel like, is this all there is, that there is even more still. So I want to be able to talk about our community. A week from Tuesday, I am planning to have a Zoom for anybody who wants to be a part of that, to be able to have a conversation about what the alternative community or the alternative message has meant to you and how it has had an impact on your life. And we're going to have these conversations that I'm really excited about. We're going to have them more regularly as well. So I want to talk about this alternative way of thinking and believing, what it is an alternative to, and why it is so attractive. Okay, and so I'm going to go after one little area that has been a little bit of a burr in my sock in all of my past experiences with evangelism. And that is the phrase that got really used a lot and still is used in evangelism, the Great Commission. The Great Commission. I was when I had a nonprofit and the very small board was discussing where we were heading and why I was uncomfortable with some things that they were wanting to do as far as fundraising. And And a wife of one of our board members says, well, don't you believe in the Great Commission? And I immediately shot back, no. And that was it. We were done. I lost a friend by saying that. And I know it was provocative of me to say that because of what the Great Commission meant to her. But what I was really saying was, I don't believe in the Great Commission as you're describing it, that I need to go around the world and rescue people from a hell, an eternity of hell. No, I don't believe that is what the so-called Great Commission was. And I want to share that with you as the corner piece to this alternative way on what Jesus might have been really saying in that. What did he mean by the commission, the commissioning them of what to do? What was he saying? What was he commissioning those disciples to do? And let me repeat that again, by a week from Tuesday, 7 o'clock on Zoom. If you're interested, please email me at henry@henryrojas.com. And I will be sending out messages to let everyone know that we'll be gathering on that Tuesday at 7 o'clock. He was sharing his teachings. He was saying to his disciples, to his followers, I want you to share these teachings, these life-giving, freeing teachings. Share them, because when you share them, people will awaken to what they didn't even know they already had. See, the Great Commission, in thinking that is going to rescue them from a hell, is introducing them to the God that is much separate from them. So he was saying, I want you to share these teachings with others. What were his teachings, and why did he warn them that they would not be received well and may even be persecuted? They might even be persecuted from within the church. And here is why. It's because of the message, not because of, listen, if we could go around and just tell everybody, hey, if you pray the abracadabra prayer, you're not going to go to hell. What is the threat there? Just pray the prayer. If that's all that needs to be done. And there are revivals that do believe that if you just pray that prayer, you're good to go. And there's no follow-up. There's nothing after that. And they're left with this idea that they are being saved from hell, and now they better not slip up. And you're not there to help them. I'm not there to help them at that point of disbelief or disillusionment. It's what gives God a bad name. So what was he teaching them? Well, he taught the Beatitudes. Powerful list of being able to say, blessed are you when you are persecuted. When you are living in that freedom and you're sharing it with others, but it might be a threat to other systems. Blessed are you when you feel weak and poor in spirit, when you are meek and merciful. Not blessed are you when you are a wimp. Blessed are you when you understand that in order to be the greatest, you need to be the least of these. When you've learned the paradoxes of this life, blessed are you. Blessed are you when you begin to realize that heaven and hell is not a place that you go to, a residence, a big mansion floating up in cloud, whatever number, that it is actually where you can reside in the presence of God now, or when you're in your own self and in your own head, you live in a hell that you need to be freed from, or being enslaved by something. Not a place created by God for all the people that he doesn't like or didn't do something right. But the hell that I can relate to and understand when I am wrestling with my own desire to be God over my wishes and my future and my regrets from the past and my self-flagellating and my self-condemnation. To be free of that. He taught the Beatitudes, the parables that constantly said the kingdom of heaven is like. Always teaching about the kingdom. Always teaching about the kingdom. That the kingdom being a place where if God were in charge, what would that freedom look like? Instead of me being in charge or somebody else being in charge or my ideology being in charge, what would that kingdom look like? He taught those Beatitudes. But check this out. He also was teaching them from a little historical perspective. He was teaching them what they were already familiar with. Mention the scribes and the Pharisees. Now, the scribes were the ones who, during that period of time, you know, with the history of the Jews, they, like anybody else, wanted greatness. They wanted to achieve. They wanted to arrive. And that goes for all of us in our human nature or our groups or whatever. Well, they had a tough time with it. Yes, they came out of enslavement, but then they were defeated by the Assyrians and the Babylonians and the Persians, and Jerusalem was left desolate. So they don't have their home. And during that time, they were the idea of having any political party was pretty much gone. So they had no strength and power from a political sense, but they did have law. They had law and they were good at it. Moving from the Ten Commandments, they had law. And law became something the scribes gave themselves to. And they wrote these books on law and how we ought to behave. Well-meaning in so many ways, because that which was in political power wanted to snuff all of the Jewish tradition out and wanted to bring in the Greek philosophies. And so they began to hunker down deeper into the law, and hundreds and thousands of laws upon laws to be able to preserve and protect. Remember, they had no political power before Jerusalem was rebuilt. They had the laws, though, and the laws adopted into society, even beyond themselves. So they had that, at least, the law. And that became very important to them. So that's the history with where Jesus begins to talk to the disciples in a new way. So he's saying, I'm not coming to abolish the original laws by which all of the intricacies have grown out of. I came to fulfill them, because what the law was incapable of doing, grace did. So back then in the Talmud, they had a discussion about the Pharisees. They actually describe some of these Pharisees. I want to give them to you right now, because you might find, oh my gosh, that actually sounds like us as Christians rather than Jesus followers. Christians, remember, I left Christianity following Jesus. So as Christians, this was how they described in the same way for them as Jews, the Pharisees. Because see, the Pharisees came after the scribes, not like after them. They came following the scribes. And the Pharisees, because of those Greek philosophies entering in, they became very, very dedicated and devoted to those laws. Very dedicated, so much so there were so many laws that they wouldn't have had a life of their own. And we know some people who are so bent on moralistic issues and law in their own lives, be it Christian or whatever, black and white thinking, haunted by the demon of the need to be right, that really don't have much of another life. And it's very difficult to have a conversation with them at a heart level, unless we are believing the same way. So these Pharisees, I drifted a little bit off from there, but you can see, you'll be able to see what Jesus is describing, or what even the Talmud is describing. This is the Talmud. These are the ancient. So they even saw this about their own Pharisees, not in necessarily a verdict on the Pharisees. The Jews themselves passed this verdict on to themselves. So they were battling this. 7 different kinds of Pharisees. And I want to go through these because they really are quite interesting. There was the shoulder, what they called the shoulder Pharisee. And the shoulder Pharisee was meticulous in his observances of the law, but he wore his good works on his shoulder, okay, for everyone to see. He was out for a reputation for purity and for goodness. True, they obeyed the law and did that well, but they did so in order to be seen by others. Those were the shoulder. Where you've heard that phrase, wearing your emotions on your sleeve. They wore their good deeds on their sleeve. There was the wait a little Pharisee, and that Pharisee would always produce an entirely valid excuse for putting off anything that was a good deed. Always an excuse. Oh, we're going to be setting up chairs. Oh, no, I got to work on my message today. Always putting it off. The good action, the feeding the hungry, clothing the poor, and sticking to the law instead. They called those the wait a little Pharisee, because you know if you wait just a little bit, somebody else is going to do it. They perfected the creeds, and they were the strictest of Pharisees, but they could always find an excuse for allowing the practices to lag behind. I got a little bit of that in me too, both of those. And then there was the bruised or bleeding Pharisee. The Talmud refers to them as the self-afflicting Pharisee. Tell me if you haven't known some like these, or you yourself. They're not really strict about the Orthodox laws as teaching. They would be seen talking to a woman in public, even that woman was his own wife or sister. They would not. Let me repeat that. No real strict Orthodox teacher would be openly talking to a woman in public. Any Orthodox teacher at that time would not be seen doing that, even if that woman was his own wife or sister. These Pharisees went even further, though. They would not even allow themselves to look at a woman on the street, and in order to avoid doing so, they would shut their eyes, like literally, and then bump into walls and buildings and obstructions. So fearful that they're watching every move they make. I don't know about you, but it seems like the more we don't want to make a mistake, we end up making mistakes, right? I see that all the time in the world of my own Christian faith. I remember going to a Christian conference, American Christian Counselors Convention in Nashville. And there's a big exhibit hall. And I looked around at what they were naming their products, that they put the Christian theme to it. And there was a jewelry vendor making jewelry, and the big giant sign at the top said the Master's Jewels. Oh my goodness. And I'm thinking, don't you realize what it is that you're saying, how that sounds? No, because they're so busy trying to be pure and trying to be Christian about everything that they don't even realize that they are leaving themselves open to mockery because they're not being genuinely human. That is a funny title for Christian jewelry, the Master's Jewels. There was the Pharisee who is variously described as a humpbacked Pharisee or the tumbling Pharisee. Such men walked in such ostentatious humility, that huge, oh, not me, but it's God. You've ever known those guys? Oh, no, I didn't. I had a guy in high school that said, no, I want to thank the Lord that I bench pressed 3 billion pounds. God did it through me. Such great humility. They were born bent like a hunchback. They were so humble that they would not even lift their feet from the ground, and then they so tripped over every obstruction that they met. Their humility was a self-advertising, ostentatious attitude, false humility. And then there was the ever-reckoning or compounding Pharisee. This person had a balance sheet between himself and God, and he believed that every good deed he did put God a little further in his debt. God, you owe me. Maybe they didn't say it outright, but I've been so good. Yeah, it's probably going to work out on my behalf because God's really thrilled, that of how I'm being. To him, religion was always to be reckoned in terms of a profit and a loss account, the ledger. So yes, we're talking about Pharisees and some of what the Talmud is saying to the Jews of that time. I think we can apply this very clearly to our own lives, in our own faiths, particular faiths. Then there was the dread of divine punishment for the fearing Pharisee, the timid Pharisee, always fearful of divine punishment. He was therefore always cleansing the outside of the cup. And I want you to put a little bookmark there, because I'm going to come back to that in a second. He was always cleaning the outside of the cup, and that he might be seen to be good, but he saw religion in terms of judgment, and life in terms of a terror-stricken evasion of this judgment. Oh, I can relate to those too. We can see all of those. But the Bible talks about hell, Henry. Finally, there was the God-fearing Pharisee. He was the Pharisee who really and truly loved God and who found his delight in obedience to the law of God, however difficult that it might be. Those were the Jews' classifications of their own Pharisees. So it's to be noted that there were these 6 bad types and 1 good one. There would be not a few listening to Jesus' denunciation of the Pharisees who agreed with every word of it. So many of them did believe that themselves. So that's why we're going to get that background to go in to the 8 woes. We're going to look in the Bible at the 8 woes, and I believe it's in chapter 23 or 28, I don't know, of Matthew. The 8 woes. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you shut the kingdom of heaven in front of people. For you do not enter it yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in. So you're not practicing these things, but your strict adherence to the laws want you to keep others out of it. It's what Paul got knocked off his ass for, was because he was keeping people out. And it transformed him when he changed. And that's a whole nother story that relates to this whole thing. He said, woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever swears by the temple, that is nothing, but whoever swears by the gold of the temple is obligated. You fools and blind men, which is more important, the gold or the temple that sanctified gold? And you say, whoever swears by the altar, that is nothing, but whoever swears. Now, what he's talking about here is he's talking about the different rituals and places within the temple. I stood by the gold. I stood by the altar. I stood by the communion table. I stood by the pastor. I associated with this person. And you claim that that is going to be good enough for you. He says, but whoever swears by those things, the throne of God, or by him who sits upon it, woe to you. And then he says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier provisions of the law. In other words, all those intricate laws even said that you needed to give 10% of your herbs. Wow, that's going to be a sacrifice. A little bit of the herbs. Okay, so they would take a little bit of their herbs they've grown and present it as a tithe. 10% of a little herb is not much in comparison to all the other laws that they were ignoring, thinking they fulfilled them all. You know, when you make yourself a moralist, you better keep all the law. You better keep all the law. And he says, and then he's speaking about that hypocrisy. By the way, hypocrisy is about wearing masks. It's about a staged thing. It's acting. That's what that word comes from. And then he says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees and hypocrites, for you build the tombs for the prophets and decorate the monuments of the righteous. And you say, if we had been living in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partners with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourselves that you are sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of the guilt of your fathers. You snakes, you offspring of vipers, how will you escape the sentence of hell? He is turning this around. That's such violence that he's using. He's pretty serious about this. But before we get into the Great Commission part, let's remember all the times Jesus spoke about the kingdom of heaven. See, when he's describing those scribes and Pharisees or us, it's who is your king? Is it the grace-giving, life-giving, love-giving king, or is it the one that is watching you be a balance sheet checker? Who wants to have God indebted to us? Is it that part of us, that scribe and Pharisee, that says that I am devoted and loyal to the gold of my ideology, my political system, my old way of thinking, my evangelistic tools, my desire to believe that only some are going to heaven? So he says, woe to those. Talk about it. He's telling the disciples to talk about the freedom that's involved here, the good news, not the half good news, but the good news, where our life on earth should be transforming to be the way that God would run it. That's the kingdom Jesus is referring to, where our life on earth should be transforming to be the way God would run it, the God of love and freedom, and the one who is free of woes. So here's the commission scripture that is used. Jesus is saying, I got the power, and I'm giving it to you. Power, what power? The power of freed will, as Jim Hansen told me. Not free will, freed will. And make all nations my disciples. Now, notice that he encouraged them to follow what he taught. That's what a disciple is, to follow what is taught, not to pray an abracadabra prayer, to follow what is taught. It was just you. Now be responsible and teach others. I had you to myself. I chose you because I wanted. And then baptize them. Make sure they are tattooed. You all get tattoos to remember that the love of God cannot be removed from your skin or from the surface of your heart where you can't see it. You are stuck with the belonging to being the beloved of God. You're stuck with it. You're tattooed with it. It cannot be removed, not even with your self-hatred and self-loathing. Tell them that. Tell them that. On whose authority? On the Father's and the Son's and the Holy Spirit's. And that they belong and are marked with the love I have given you. And teach them to keep all the commandments that I've given you. Not the thousands, the ones I gave you. Which ones are those? 2, love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. We add thousands upon those, don't we? Okay, so we're only allowed to love these certain people, but you can love them, but don't have dinner with them because they don't behave the way that you think they ought to behave. No, don't accept the gay couple because it doesn't fit our theology. We're adding to the 2 commandments Jesus gave that said if we did those, we would fulfill all the laws. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. It's one thing to have those laws influence the way that you live. It's another thing to live those laws to influence the way you want to influence others or get yourself into heaven. Listen to how the Great Commission was interpreted by a very popular online magazine. I even, there's some good stuff, some not so good stuff, just like anything else. But it's called Facts and Trends, and this is from a Baptist minister as he talks about the Great Commission. This is what he says. The countless thousands of people surrounding our churches who are facing a Christless eternity are not going to trip and fall into the kingdom of God. Evidently, he hasn't hung out with the people in my community. I would say they often trip and fall their way into the kingdom of God. Would you? We churches filled with people who call themselves Christians but do not know how to feed themselves spiritually. He says we need more ambitious churches. Oh my goodness. You mean our churches are not ambitious enough? I don't know. He says the Great Commission sets the direction for our efforts, not grace, for our efforts. We are to go and we are to make disciples. We go to the lost and the unchurched, and we make disciples, which means evangelizing them, baptizing them, and teaching them to obey. Oh, my Lord. If Jesus was giving the disciples the power to force other people to obey, it would look a lot different. It's frightening. It would look a lot like it does now. Let me go back to what he's saying. Just so disturbing to me. Then those disciples join in making disciples. The Great Commission should be the directional orientation of every church. Meaning what? This is what our churches should be ambitious and to run after. Meaning what? He says, and he quotes another pastor, Christianity is about world domination. Seriously, this is what it says. Christianity is about world domination, not through force or arms, but through the gospel. That the good news should dominate you. Remember last week I was talking about that the power that we receive in recognizing our powerlessness is not the power over something or someone. It is the power with. This is power over that he's describing. And I'm not okay with it. Not okay with it because it's up to me. It's just not what I see when Jesus is speaking. As my friend Phil said not too long ago, he said, Henry, back in the day when they had the "What Would Jesus Do" bracelets, WWJD, he goes, it should have never been "What would Jesus do" right now in these circumstances, because he had similar then. It should be, what did Jesus do? And I think Phil is absolutely right. We need to look at what he did and who he was speaking to and what their culture was. Here's what the Franciscan Richard Rohr says just this last week in his work on the kingdom and the reign of God. He says the kingdom is about union and communion, which means that it is about mercy, forgiveness, nonviolence, letting go, solidarity, service, lives of love, patience, and simplicity. Who could doubt that this is the sum and substance of Jesus' teaching? In the reign of God, the very motive for rivalry, greed, and violence has been destroyed. We know we are all part of God's beloved community. And then he quotes Lisa Sharon Harper this way. She says, evidence of the presence of the kingdom of God is thick wherever and whenever people stand on the promise of God that there is more to this world, more to this world, more to this life than what we see. There is more than the getting over, the getting by, or the getting mine. There is more than the brokenness, the destruction, and the despair that threaten to wash over us like the waters of the deep. There is a vision of a world where God cuts through the chaos, where God speaks and there is light. There is a vision where there is protection and where love is binding every relationship together. What an attraction. Then Rohr says, Jesus did not come to impose Christianity like an imperial system. Every description he offers of God's reign of love, relationship, non-judgment, and forgiveness, where the last shall be first and the first shall be last, shows that imposition is not an impossibility. Wherever we have tried to force Christianity on people, the long-term results have been disastrous, he says. The gospel flourishing is in the realm of true freedom. But it is freedom we must choose for ourselves, that we want this freedom. Not that it's not ours for the taking, but we need to translate it to our mind and our heart. That's what he means by choosing. Not that you're divided up into those who choose and those who didn't, but to be able to live this out, we need to embrace that freedom we've been given. It is almost impossible to turn away from what seems like the only game in town. Political, economic, and religious, unless we have glimpsed a more. It is hard to imagine it, much less imitate it, unless we see someone else do it first. Jesus is the icon of the more attractive alternative, a living parable. Jesus has forever changed our human imagination, and we are now both burdened and gladdened by the new possibility. There is good news to counter the deadening bad news, but one first has to be turned away from a conventional way of understanding. The attractive alternative, that phrase just struck me. That's what we are at the Community of the Wild Goose. Part of an alternative, an attractive alternative. And a lot of my old Christian mates would say it shouldn't be attractive, it should be convicting. No, we pass through the suffering part in order to see what we long for always, which is enormously attractive. And then finally, this little short paragraph, you'll indulge me, because I think Richard Rohr is describing the Community of the Wild Goose. That, by the way, has no walls and no invitations, no memberships. It has no greeters, no name tags, because we all are a part of this together. He says, I do not think Jesus ever expected that the whole world would become formally Christian, but his truth about right relationship and his proclamation of the power of powerlessness will save the world from self-destruction. The power of powerlessness. That's an attractive alternative. You tell me. Why would it be attractive? Why would anyone say, oh, you know what, those guys are watering the gospel down, the good news down, or they just want something that feels good. That's why they are saying it's attractive. But you tell me, what is attractive about dying ones whose prior inclinations to amusing themselves to death? Or let me repeat that. I wrote that very poorly. What is attractive about denying one's prior inclinations to amusing themselves to death? It's not attractive to let go in things that have just been numbing me and amusing me. What is attractive for them to stop avoiding pain and conflict and temporary sufferings? What is attractive to admit I am powerless over others, over nature, over life's big realities? What is attractive about being a server instead of always being the served? What is attractive about not having the amenities that big churches do? What is attractive to learn from the not so popular people? What is attractive about believing God did not make my tribe the special ones, but actually encourages us to be the grateful ones? What is so attractive about building bridges and getting attacked from both sides? What is attractive about bragging about our weaknesses instead of our achievements? What is so darn attractive about knowing any one of us could get a call in the middle of the night, and many of us do, from someone who says, I'm struggling and I've forgotten who I am. Could you please remind me before I get another king of my kingdom again? I'll tell you what's attractive. It's freedom. No, not flag waving freedom. I'm not going to wear a mask kind of freedom. Freedom to be human. Or as Pinocchio says, to discover I'm a real person, I'm a real boy. With all its bumps and bruises and all its emotionally debilitating reactions, all the things that say we are alive. The same body and mind that can hurt also experiences the power, the peacefulness of Horton Creek, custom cupcakes and orgasms, the freedom that wakes up in the morning and is tired from binging watching Schitt's Creek the night before instead of simply being hungover, the freedom that is alerted when a friend becomes sick and needs a ride to the ER, or they've called at last minute to say they have tickets to see Sting or John Mayer. And how about that guy who's awake when he gets that call? He's sober. How about that? Maybe for the first time. And they get to go to that concert or take their friend to the ER. They get to be the one because they're awakened. And they can be reached. The freedom to say yes to things you want to say yes to and no to things you don't. The freedom from self-loathing and religious duty, emotional obligations, eggshell walking freedom that appeared to be sold like memberships or loyalty cards. The freedom that is so real it penetrates the pandemic-ridden cells of your body and says, you are my child in whom I am well pleased because you belong. If you've never left your house, you still belong. The freedom that cannot be kept out by human walls or pretentious statements of faith. That's what's attractive about being a disciple of the liberating one. Not a robot, a blood brother, a person of potential, a rule keeper, a Bible thumper, a life coach, a therapist, a scholar, an addict, a stay-at-home dad, a CEO, a minister. No, it's a person who feels like they've been chosen for no good reason, not because they have anything to offer, but simply because they are wanted on life's terms, where I don't control the outcomes, the beliefs of others, or the God whose affection for me is greater than all of my fears and my inhibitions. If that's what you want, if you've been tired that the more you've wanted is missing, The people who have admitted they are powerless over drugs and alcohol, over work, sex, hate, food, enabling, overachieving, underachieving, political ideology, emotionally escaping, anger, and God-fearing. They are gathering at the community of the Wild Goose with an attractive alternative for all people. No requirements, no agenda, just a desire to be apprentices of the great liberator. Here's the deal. They are obligated to share it. Just read the 12 steps. Not shrink into the comfort warming of embers of mediocrity, but to enter the world that might reject them, to teach them they too can be free from their addiction from themselves. You say, Henry, you don't understand. I'm broken. I have been one of those Pharisees, and I didn't know it. Those people who was keeping the outside of my dish clean, but it was dirty on the inside with my need to be right or to be in control or to think I needed to be enough. You say, I've been one of those. And I think I'm beyond change. Okay, we'll get ready. Because Jesus used something like this as an example. I can't clean the inside of this vase, clay pot. I can't clean the inside of it, but I can make the outside look really good, and we've done that. To recognize that I am powerless is to recognize that I can't clean the inside unless it's broken and poured out for you and me. The image of Christ being broken for us is the mentorship of the one who is liberating us from our need to keep it intact and to make it good on the outside. The only way that it can change is to be broken. And if you think I'm going to get dramatic and break this, you're really wrong, because I'm not going to. But I need to be broken or recognize my brokenness. And you don't fix it and then act like it never was broken. You don't fix it and pretend that all is better. You recognize that it was the brokenness that lets the light in. That the pieces may have been together, and if necessary, it might need to be crumbled and crushed and reformed into a new pot. But the only way we can get to the inside is to break it. Like that woman in the Bible who broke the container filled with precious perfume that was very costly, because it's what is valuable is what is inside, not what is on the outside. And that includes God. That includes the kingdom of heaven on earth. That includes the treasures of your heart. That's what I'm inviting you to participate in at the Community of the Wild Goose. But we got to let go of all those parts of us that Jesus said woe to. Let go of those parts of us that held our political, economic, religious ideals higher than the one that said, unless you give yourself as the lowest, you're not worthy to be exalted to the highest. Living the paradox. Laughing in the face of our present sufferings because we know that joy awaits. The community of the broken. The community of the grateful. For many of us, it might not mean leaving the institution that we are at, but bringing something to it. The more that many are either waiting for an escape hatch to get out of, or they love where they are. They just need to understand what the divine more of acceptance is. To be able to say that the commission that we've been receiving is not to save somebody from hell, but to awaken them to the heaven that is right in them and around them. The kingdom of heaven at hand, not the kingdom of heaven that is so far out of reach that you've got to run through the obstacle course to get there. No. That's just polishing this thing up. Let it be broken. Let it be. It's not I who lives, but Christ who lives in me. It's not I who wears Christ on the sleeve, but Christ who is in me. It's not I who lives according to my man-made laws in order to be more moral and earn my way. It is the freedom and grace of Christ that lives within me. You begin to live like that. You begin to explore like that. You're going to feel naughty. You're going to feel like you're abandoning many of the pillars and foundations you thought supported your stance. But you know what? What we find out is that nursery school rhyme in Sunday school it was Sunday school rhyme that we learned about the man who built his house upon the sand. All of those things are just shifting sands. And we need to cling to the rock that says, I got your back and I love you as you are. And may all our participant nature of being part of this community, whether you've ever been a part or not, you already belong. Whether you behave or not, you belong. Whether you believe a certain thing or not, you belong. It was declared over you in this humanity. You are a member. You are a part. You are one of the community of the Wild Goose, because the community of the Wild Goose is the largest megachurch in the world. Why? Because even if only 60 are gathering in person, we believe that everyone belongs. Not to our title or our name or the roof over our heads, but the God who loves them. Good night, you all, and I hope that you will participate a week from Tuesday at 7:00. It might be that just maybe this message touched you in some way and you either have something you want to say or you want to ask a question. There's a bunch of knuckleheads that will cheer you on in your knuckleheadedness and in your awkwardness. Peace.